I am Harrison, and I am 33 years old. Exactly 15 years ago, my own flesh and blood abandoned me at a desolate, sun-baked gas station in the absolute middle of nowhere, leaving me stranded with nothing but the clothes on my back. While I was standing in the suffocating dust of a Nebraska highway, panicking and wondering how I was going to survive the night, my older brother Julian laughed into his cell phone and said, "Let's see if you can find your way home, loser." My parents sat in the front seats of our family van, listening to him humiliate me, and they simply let him hang up the phone. They drove off, leaving me completely alone, miles from civilization, telling themselves it was character building. But there is one thing they did not know. My grandmother saw everything they did to me over the years, and she left behind a secret inheritance that would eventually turn their perfect, fake, heavily mortgaged lives to absolute ash. And now, 15 years after they threw me away like garbage, they are the ones standing outside my front door, begging for mercy. Before I tell you exactly what happened and how I brought their house of cards crashing down, hit that like button if you believe in justice. And do not forget to let me know where you are watching from in the comments section below. I read every single one of them. Now, let us go back to where this storm finally broke. It was a Tuesday evening in late October, and the rain was hammering against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown apartment. I work as a freelance tech consultant, mostly dealing with cybersecurity, data management, and corporate network architecture. My life is incredibly quiet, incredibly stable, and absolutely drama-free. I designed it that way on purpose. I have a solid income, a heavily funded 401k that I built from absolute zero, and a small circle of friends who actually care about whether I live or die. My phone is usually completely silent after 6 in the evening, unless it is a high-paying client or an automated calendar alert. I had just finished compiling a massive security audit for a logistics firm, and I was pouring myself a glass of water when the screen of my phone lit up on the kitchen island. Started buzzing, and it just would not stop. I walked over and looked at the screen. The caller ID displayed an unknown number from an area code I had not seen in a decade and a half. I let it go to voicemail. 10 seconds later, another call from a different unknown number. Then a text message. Then another call. By the time I finally picked up my phone to manually silence the notifications, my lock screen was an absolute waterfall of alerts. I unlocked the screen, swiping through the logs with a growing sense of dread pooling in my stomach. Texts, missed calls, frantic voicemails. I counted them, my heart hammering against my ribs. A total of 107 missed calls. I opened the first text message. The area code was from my hometown, a wealthy, image-obsessed suburb filled with HOA meetings and manicured lawns, a place I had sworn to never set foot in again. The message read, "Harrison, please pick up. It is Mom. We need to talk. It is about Grandma." I froze completely. I literally felt the blood drain from my face, leaving my skin cold and clammy. I stared at the glowing screen, the harsh blue light reflecting off the dark window of my living room. For 15 agonizing years, I had successfully scrubbed these people from my existence. I had no Facebook, no Instagram, no public social media footprint whatsoever. I made sure my name was not easily searchable unless you were a corporate executive looking for an independent tech contractor. I built an impenetrable fortress around my peace of mind. And in one single text message, Brenda, the woman who gave birth to me, had found the one microscopic crack in my armor. She used the only word that could still make my chest ache. Grandma. Margaret, my grandmother, was the only person in that entire toxic bloodline who ever treated me like a human being instead of an inconvenience. When I was a kid, she used to sneak me $5 bills when my parents were not looking just for being polite. She would sit with me at those awful Thanksgiving dinners where I was mostly ignored, and she would whisper over the mashed potatoes, "You see everything, Harrison. Do not let them dim your light." She was sharp, she was deeply observant, and she knew exactly how malicious my parents and my siblings truly were. The thought that she was gone hit me like a physical punch to the gut. I had to lean against the cold marble of the kitchen island just to keep my balance. But then the raw emotion faded and cold, calculating logic kicked in. I know my family. I know Brenda's relentless manipulative tactics. I know my father Richard's cowardly avoidance of anything resembling conflict. And I certainly know Julian, my golden child brother, and Penelope, my spoiled, opportunistic younger sister. They do not do anything out of genuine grief. They do not do anything out of love. Emotion, for them, is nothing but a currency. It is a highly effective tool used strictly to manipulate a situation and get a desired result. I did not answer the text. I did not call back. I sat down in my ergonomic office chair, staring out at the city skyline blurred by the rain, and I listened to the voicemails. One by one, I let their voices invade my sanctuary. Harrison, it is Julian. Call Mom back. Quit being a ghost and grow up, man. His voice was exactly the same as I remembered, dripping with that arrogant, unearned superiority he always carried around like a badge of honor. He spoke to me as if I were a misbehaving dog. Then came Penelope. Harry, it is me. We really need you to call us back. Your niece wants to meet her uncle. Call us back. It is really important. She threw in a child I had never even met as emotional bait. A smiley face attached to a text message, as if a photograph of a kid could erase a lifetime of psychological abuse. Classic Penelope, always looking for the cheapest angle. Then my mother's voice filled the quiet room. Harrison, it has been 15 years. Whatever childish grudge you are holding on to, it is time to let it go. Grandma is gone. We need to discuss the estate. Call me immediately. The estate. There it was. The magic word. The real reason the phone was ringing. They had not spent a decade and a half desperately searching for their lost son because they missed having me at the dinner table. They did not care that I missed every single holiday, every birthday, every graduation, and every major life event. They found me because a lawyer somewhere told them they absolutely had to. I placed my phone face down on the wooden desk. The sheer audacity of their behavior was suffocating. They genuinely thought they could just snap their manicured fingers, demand my presence, and I would come running back, ready to play the obedient, silent background character I used to be. They thought I was still that broken 18-year-old kid. I thought the worst part of my life was over 15 years ago. I was so incredibly wrong. The real war was just beginning. To truly understand why I walked away from my own blood and never looked back, you have to understand the rigid, suffocating hierarchy of my family dynamic. In my childhood home, love was not a right. It was not unconditional. Love was heavily rationed, conditional, and exclusively reserved for Julian and Penelope. I was the extra sibling, the one who just happened to be there. Julian was the firstborn. He was the golden child. He was the varsity athlete who never actually won a state championship but was treated by my parents like an Olympic gold medalist. My parents joyfully maxed out his college fund without a second thought. When he turned 16, they bought him a brand new, excessively expensive car. When he crashed it 6 months later because he was driving recklessly under the influence, my father Richard just patted him on the back, paid the massive insurance deductible, and bought him another one. Boys will be boys, Richard used to say, completely ignoring the danger Julian put others in. Julian blew his summer job money constantly, and I was the one forced to help him make his car payments just to keep the peace. Then there was Penelope, the baby of the family, the untouchable princess. She could do absolutely no wrong in the eyes of Brenda and Richard. If she broke an expensive vase in the hallway, it was somehow my fault for leaving it too close to the edge of the table. If she failed a math class, the teacher was clearly incompetent and out to get her. When she snuck out of the house to go to parties, I was the one forced to cover for her, lying to my parents so she would not face any consequences. And then there was me, Harrison, the middle child, the default helper. I was the designated scapegoat and the unpaid domestic worker. I was the one who mowed the massive lawn, cleaned the gutters in the freezing cold, and washed the mountain of dishes every night so Julian could go to his fraternity-style parties and Penelope could go to the mall with her friends. I did chores without ever being asked. My parents praised me with a hollow pat on the back and the phrase, "We do not have to worry about Harrison." It sounded like a compliment to outsiders, but it was not. I knew exactly what it meant. It meant they did not have to put any emotional or financial effort into me whatsoever. They did not have to think about me. I was practically invisible in my own home. Things reached a catastrophic breaking point the summer I turned 18. I had just graduated from high school. There was no big graduation party for me. There was no college fund waiting in a bank account. I was quietly planning to go to the local community college and work full-time double shifts at a hardware store just to pay my own way. My father, in a rare, misguided moment of trying to manufacture some fake family unity, decided we should all take a massive road trip across the Midwest. It was supposed to be one last summer together before Julian went back to his expensive university and everyone moved on. I did not want to go. I knew exactly how it would play out. But Brenda laid the emotional guilt on incredibly thick, using her soft, manipulative voice. "It is our last chance to be a real family under one roof, Harrison. Do not be so selfish and ruin this for your father." So I caved. I went. I even offered to help plan the entire thing. I built the itinerary, mapped the specific route, and printed backup directions in case my dad's GPS failed. But the moment we left the driveway, the reality of my position was violently reinforced. Julian immediately claimed the front passenger seat next to my dad. Penelope stretched out in the middle row, complaining constantly about the heat and dictating the music. I was banished to the very back of the van, wedged painfully next to our family luggage and a cheap plastic cooler that leaked ice water all over my duffel bag for 3 days straight. By the time we hit the desolate highways of Nebraska, the tension inside the van was absolutely unbearable. Julian was relentlessly picking on me. Penelope was whining about the motels smelling like old AC units and disappointment, and my parents were blissfully ignoring all of it. We pulled into a dusty, isolated gas station right off the highway, situated in a town with exactly one blinking traffic light and a diner that looked like it had not updated its menu since the 1960s. "I am going inside to grab some water and snacks," I announced, unbuckling my seatbelt and stretching my cramped legs. My clothes were damp from the leaking cooler. "Just hurry up and do not keep us waiting," my mother snapped without turning around. I walked into the convenience store. It took me maybe 5 minutes to grab the drinks, pay the apathetic cashier, and walk back out into the blinding, oppressive summer sun. I pushed the heavy glass door open, holding a plastic bag full of water bottles. I looked toward the gas pump where our silver van had been parked. It was empty. I blinked, shielding my eyes from the glare, thinking maybe my dad had moved to a parking spot near the back of the lot to check the tire pressure. I walked the entire lot twice, then 3 times. Nothing. Just an empty stretch of cracked asphalt baking in the heat. My heart did a strange, terrifying flutter. I walked back toward the front entrance. The cashier, a woman cracking gum between every word, watched me through the window with a funny look on her face. She stepped outside. "You lose your ride?" she asked. "Just waiting," I mumbled, pulling my cheap prepaid cell phone out of my pocket. No new messages. No signal. I walked toward the very edge of the highway, holding my phone high up in the air until I finally got one single bar of service. 15 agonizing minutes passed. Then 30 minutes. Panic firmly set in. I was 18 years old. I had exactly $20 in my pocket. All my clothes, my ID, my entire life was sitting in the back of that van. I hit dial on my phone. I called my mother's number. It rang and rang until it hit voicemail. I called my dad. Voicemail. Finally, I called Julian. On the 3rd ring, he picked up. I could hear the radio blasting in the background. He was snickering. "Julian, where are you guys?" I demanded, my voice tight with fear. Julian just laughed louder and then abruptly hung up the phone. That was the exact moment the devastating reality sank in. They had done this on purpose. It was a prank, or what they violently defended as a prank. My phone rang. It was Penelope. I answered immediately. "Let's see if you can find your way back, Melon." She laughed cruelly into the receiver. "Maybe you will finally grow a personality." Then, she disconnected the call. They thought abandoning me was hilarious. They called it character building. I sat on the filthy concrete curb outside that gas station for 3 full hours. I watched every single car that passed, desperately hoping to see our van turn around. By the 3rd hour, the cashier came outside and silently handed me a bottle of orange soda. "You okay, Han?" she asked quietly. "I wasn't," I replied, but I nodded anyway. They were not coming back. At least not that day or the next. Eventually, a large semi-truck pulled into the lot. The driver, a burly guy named Hank, got out. His silence was infinitely more comforting than any of my family's cruel laughter. When he offered me a ride into the next major town, I did not hesitate. I climbed into the cab of that truck, leaving my family behind in the dust. I used what little cash I had left to buy a bus ticket to a city 3 states away, where a friend from high school, Marcus, lived. I slept on his couch and took a grueling dishwashing job. My phone buzzed nonstop for the first week, then less, then not at all. When I finally checked my voicemail, there was a message from Brenda. "It has been 3 days. Enough already. Come back and stop being dramatic." Dramatic. That was the word they constantly used to gaslight me whenever I tried to speak up or express that it hurt to be the afterthought. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I did not call them back. I did not answer the messages. I took the phone apart, snapped the SIM card in half, and threw it in a dumpster. That was the day I chose to become an orphan. The next 15 years of my life were brutally difficult, but they were entirely mine. I never went home. I got a dishwashing job, then a second job stocking shelves at a massive Walmart during the night shift. I moved out of Marcus's apartment and into a tiny, run-down studio. I worked myself to the absolute bone, went back to school, and quietly finished my degree online. I built a career piece by grueling piece. No credit cards in my dad's name. No student loans co-signed by my mom. Just distance and complete silence. I climbed the corporate ladder, secured a high-paying salary, and eventually branched out to start my own freelance consulting firm. I met incredible people who saw me not for what chores I could do for them, but for who I actually was. I completely stopped apologizing for existing, and I stopped looking back. I became financially bulletproof because I had to be. So, when those 107 missed calls violently interrupted my peaceful Tuesday evening, I did not feel the sudden, overwhelming urge to run back into their toxic embrace. I did not feel nostalgia. I felt highly suspicious. I waited a full week. During that entire week, I kept a cheap burner phone nearby and simply observed. I did not reply to a single text. Instead, I opened my laptop and started doing what I do best as a data consultant. I dug for the truth. I started collecting their quiet inquiries, their frantic online searches, a LinkedIn visit from Julian here, a Facebook scroll from Penelope there. It did not take me long to piece the entire puzzle together. Public records are incredibly easy to access if you know the exact databases to query. It took me less than 45 minutes to confirm the devastating truth. Margaret, my beloved grandmother, had passed away 3 full months ago. 3 months. They buried the only woman who ever showed me an ounce of kindness, and they did not even bother to try and contact me. They let her go into the ground without giving me a chance to stand at her grave and say goodbye. The rage that boiled inside me in that moment was white-hot and blinding. I gripped the edge of my heavy oak desk until my knuckles turned stark white. But why the sudden, explosive urgency now? Why were they calling me 107 times today, 3 months after the funeral? I dug deeper, hacking through the county probate court public filings. The 107 calls started immediately after the official reading of the will. Grandma owned a paid-off, beautiful little house in the suburbs. She also had a savings account that was not massive, but definitely large enough to turn heads. According to the legal filings, the estate was currently deadlocked in probate court. There was a massive legal snag. I sat back in my chair, staring at the glowing monitor, and a cold, dangerous smile slowly spread across my face. Grandma had not left the house to my parents. She had not left it to her precious golden child, Julian. She had not left a single dime to Penelope. She left the house, the savings, and the entire estate heavily to me. Harrison, the kid they stranded at a gas station in Nebraska. I was no longer just the estranged, invisible son. I was now the highly inconvenient legal owner of the exact assets they desperately wanted to get their hands on. They could not sell the property. They could not liquidate the bank accounts. They could not do a single damn thing without my explicit, notarized legal signature because I was the sole beneficiary listed on the deed. The 107 missed calls were not an apology for 15 years of neglect. They were a frantic hostage negotiation, and I held the only key to the vault. I knew exactly how they operated. They would show up smiling, pretending they missed me, insisting we were all just kids back then, and manipulating me into letting bygones be bygones. First thing the next morning, I initiated my own plan. I still did not answer their endless calls. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Mr. Harrington, the high-profile estate attorney listed on the probate court documents. Mr. Harrington's office, the receptionist answered. This is Harrison, I said smoothly. I am calling regarding the estate of Margaret. I believe you have been actively looking for me. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before the attorney himself picked up the transfer. Harrison, yes. Your family assured me they were handling the communication to locate you, but quite frankly, their complete inability to produce you was stalling the entire legal process. We need to verify the deed transfer. I am fully aware, I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. I do not speak to my family. Any communication regarding my grandmother's estate will go directly through me and only me. I want all documents prepared immediately. I am updating my mailing address with your office right now. I booked a first-class flight to the city where I was now suddenly a property owner. I packed a small, neat suitcase. I did not tell Marcus or anyone else where I was going. This was a war I had to wage on my own. When I landed in my hometown, the air felt exactly the same. Heavy, stifling, and thick with pretense. I rented a car, but I did not drive to the sprawling suburban McMansion my parents lived in. I never had a real home there anyway. I drove straight to Grandma's house. The neighborhood was incredibly quiet. The house was small, meticulously clean, and still smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The silence was heavy. Her belongings were still completely intact, but I noticed something immediately. Everything was boxed up neatly by the corners. They had already packed her life away, probably assuming they could just forge my signature or legally bully me into signing the deed over the moment they finally located me. Her photos were all still sitting on the mantel except mine. Not a single photo of me was there, just Julian's graduation pictures, Penelope's prom photos, and family barbecues I was never even invited to. I stood in that living room for a very long time, absorbing the reality of my new power. Then, I opened my laptop, connected to the Wi-Fi, and aggressively got to work. I called a local contractor to immediately change all the locks on the doors and windows. I filed an official change of mailing address with the post office. I was not sure what I was going to do with the property yet. Sell it, rent it, or maybe just move in for a while to breathe untainted by their obligation. But one thing was certain. They were not getting a single square inch of it. The next morning, the silence of the house was shattered by my burner phone ringing. It was Brenda. I stared at the screen for a moment before I finally pressed accept. I did not say hello. Harrison? She asked cautiously. There was a heavy pause, as if she could not quite believe I had actually picked up the phone after 15 years. I remained completely silent, letting her sweat. We did not know you were coming back, Brenda stammered, her voice dripping with fake concern. We thought you were still angry. You could have told us. We were planning to stop by the house this week to talk things through. Maybe come to some kind of agreement. Agreement. There it was. It was absolutely never about Grandma. It was never about genuine grief. It was strictly about assets. I came to see the house, I said flatly, my voice a wall of ice. And I already spoke directly to the estate attorney. Brenda's soft, motherly tone vanished instantly. Her voice sharpened into a blade. Harrison, do not be difficult. You are not the only grandchild. Julian and Penelope did not get left anything. And I think we both know exactly why. I cut in, shutting her down. There was a stunned silence on the line. Then, dropping her voice to just above a vicious whisper, she hissed. You cannot seriously be planning to keep the house. You owe us more than this. That was the exact moment the final shift happened inside me. No matter how many corporate jobs I held, how many degrees I earned, or how much wealth I built, they would always view me as the placeholder, the background character they could discard and still sleep soundly. I can, and I am. I owe you absolutely nothing, I stated firmly. Then I hung up the phone. The retaliation was immediate. The next call came 20 minutes later from Julian. I let it ring. Then Penelope called. Then Brenda again. I sat at the kitchen table, watching the missed calls aggressively rack up. 108, 109, 112. And then, exactly as I predicted, came the loud, measured knock on the front door. The knock was not frantic. It was heavily controlled, like someone trying desperately hard to sound completely normal and calm. But I had grown up in the epicenter of that toxic chaos. I knew exactly what their false cheer sounded like. I stood in the hallway just past the kitchen, staring at the heavy wooden front door. A younger version of me, the terrified teenager stranded at the gas station, might have run to that door with a nervous smile, hoping they were finally sorry. But that Harrison was dead and buried. I waited for 2 more knocks before I finally stepped forward and opened the main door, leaving the heavy metal screen door securely locked between us. Standing outside on the porch were all 3 of them. Julian was dressed in his usual smug business casual attire, sleeves rolled up like he was about to deliver a pretentious TED Talk. Penelope was clutching an oversized designer purse and a Starbucks cup. And Brenda looked like she had meticulously dressed up for a church service she had not actually attended in years. Harrison, Brenda breathed, flashing a bright, breathy smile, as if we had just casually bumped into each other at the local grocery store. There he is, Julian chimed in, projecting false bravado. I did not say a single word. I just stared at them through the mesh wire. We just wanted to talk, Brenda continued, glancing nervously around the porch as if terrified the suburban neighbors might hear the drama. Clear the air. You left so suddenly after everything. You mean after you left me? I corrected her coldly, keeping my hand firmly on the locked door handle. Julian sighed loudly, dramatically rubbing his temples as if my trauma was exhausting to him. Look, man, we were kids. It was a stupid joke. We were just messing around. You were 19. I shot back instantly. And I was not in on the joke. Penelope leaned in, her fake smile flickering. We said we were sorry. So what? You are just going to cut us out of everything because of something that happened 15 years ago? I raised an eyebrow. You mean like when you cut me out of every single holiday, every birthday, and every family update like that? Brenda's voice wavered, playing the victim. We did not know how to reach you. You had absolutely no problem finding me when Grandma's will came through, I stated. That hit them hard. I saw the truth land in Brenda's eyes, in the tight, furious pinch of Julian's jaw, and in the way Penelope suddenly looked down at her coffee cup. Brenda tried a different angle, softening her tone to weaponize Grandma's memory. You know, Grandma would have wanted us to stick together. She always loved having us all under one roof. She left this house to me, I said plainly. That was her final word. Julian stepped forward aggressively, placing his hand casually on the screen door handle, testing it. It was locked tight. Come on, man. You do not even live in this state. You are not planning to stay, right? You could sign the deed over. We could sell it, split the money, make it fair. Fair. I almost laughed out loud. Like fairness had ever factored into a single decision they made. Like fairness was stranding your youngest brother in Nebraska to teach him a lesson. I think I am going to hold on to it for now, I replied effortlessly. Penelope groaned loudly, dropping the sweet sister act. Are you serious? You have not even been here in years. This is not your home. I looked at the wind chimes hanging from the eaves, the faded metal clinking softly in the breeze. I looked at the overgrown pink rose bushes Grandma had planted. I looked straight into Penelope's furious eyes. Maybe not, but it is definitely not yours either. Julian lost his pretense of the wealthy, calm businessman. His face twisted in genuine rage. You are making a massive mistake. If you do this, do not expect any of us to be there when you change your mind. Noted, I said calmly, and I began to close the heavy wooden door. Brenda slammed her hand against the frame to stop it. Harrison, do not throw away your family over a house. I leaned casually against the doorframe, looking down at her perfectly manicured nails. You already threw me away. This is just the very first time you have realized it might actually cost you something. She stared at me in stunned silence, her mouth opening and closing. Then, with a sharp, defeated breath, she stepped back. Julian turned on his heel and marched toward his car without another word. Penelope lingered for a second, trying to find something clever to say, but failed miserably. I closed the heavy door, locked the deadbolt, and for the very first time in 15 years, an unfamiliar, incredible sensation washed completely over me. Power. They were not in control anymore. They could not guilt me. They could not gaslight me into believing I was too sensitive or too forgettable. I had been silent, but I had never forgotten. But I did not realize that by locking them out, I had just locked myself inside with Grandma's biggest, most dangerous secret. A secret Julian was about to threaten me over. A secret that would change the trajectory of all our lives forever. Later that evening, after I had locked the heavy front door and firmly shut my family out of the house, the silence inside felt entirely different. It was no longer just the quiet of an empty building. It was the heavy, expectant silence of a battlefield right before the final catastrophic clash. I walked through the house room by room, turning on the vintage lamps, letting the warm yellow light spill across the beautifully maintained hardwood floors. I took my time, allowing myself to truly occupy the space. I found Grandma's old letters tied meticulously in thin cotton string inside her writing desk. I found her handwritten recipes tucked away in the kitchen drawer, smelling faintly of cinnamon and vanilla. I even found a photo I absolutely did not expect to see, hidden in the very back of a worn leather album in the guest bedroom. It was a picture of me and her on a Christmas visit, just the two of us laughing over mugs of hot cocoa while the rest of the family ignored us in the other room. She had not forgotten me. While the rest of them had actively tried to erase my existence, she had quietly kept me alive in her home. That night, I made tea in her old copper kettle, sat in her favorite upholstered chair by the living room window, and let the quiet settle over my shoulders. Then my burner phone buzzed again, vibrating harshly against the wooden side table. It was a new, unrecognized number leaving a voicemail. When I played the audio, Julian's voice came violently through the tiny speaker. You think you have won something, Harrison? You do not even know what you are holding. You think Grandma left this house to you out of love? She was losing her mind at the end. Keep digging, little brother. You will wish you never did. I have a high-powered lawyer ready to file a massive lawsuit to contest the inheritance. We will claim undue influence. We will tie up this real estate in probate court for a decade. You are going to lose everything. The message ended abruptly. For the first time in 15 years, I felt something remarkably close to a thrill. I did not sleep that night. I sat in Grandma's old chair, the one with the floral cushion that had perfectly molded to her frame over years of completing Sunday crosswords, and I listened to Julian's voicemail on a continuous loop. You do not even know what you are holding. That specific line got completely under my skin. It was not just petty spite. There was something else hidden deep in Julian's voice. It sounded incredibly tight, highly bitter, and noticeably panicked. It did not sound like a bluff. He was angry, yes, but he also sounded deeply threatened, and that was a brand new dynamic. Julian had never once looked at me as anything more than an underfoot inconvenience. Whatever Grandma had left me, it was not just the physical real estate. The next morning, as the sun barely crested over the suburban rooftops, I pulled out the heavy cardboard boxes my mother had packed up and left stacked in the corner of the living room. They were neatly labeled with Brenda's obsessive handwriting. Books, photos, kitchen, the usual household categories. I dug through them with methodical precision, opening every single envelope, shaking out every book, and flipping through every spiral notebook. Took hours. My hands were covered in dust. My back ached, but I could not stop. I knew there was something here that terrified my golden child brother. It was halfway through a heavy box marked linens and old blankets that I finally found something deeply strange. Tucked inside a pair of slippers still sealed in their original packaging, there was a flat, unbranded black notebook sandwiched perfectly between folded flannel sheets. At first glance, it looked like a mundane household ledger for groceries or utility bills. But when I flipped the heavy cover open, the very first page was addressed directly to me in Grandma's unmistakable, looping handwriting. Harrison, if you were reading this, then you finally came home, and I hope to God you are safe. I did not tell them. I did not tell anyone. But you were always the one who paid attention. You saw the truth when everyone else chose to look away. That is exactly why I am leaving this to you. My hands tightened involuntarily around the edge of the thick paper. The next few pages laid out a reality I absolutely never expected in my wildest dreams. Margaret, my sweet, quiet grandmother who spent her afternoons baking pies and attending garden club meetings, had been quietly and aggressively investing for decades. She bought highly lucrative blue-chip stocks during market dips. She acquired commercial real estate in developing neighborhoods long before the economic boom hit our state. She even seed-funded some small technology startups years before they took off and went public. She had never talked about her wealth. She kept her entire financial footprint completely under the radar, living well below her means. She mentioned it exactly once, apparently to my mother, who completely shrugged it off as old lady delusions and never followed up. But Margaret had not been delusional. Far from it. She was wealthy beyond comprehension. The house I was standing in was not just a sentimental gift. It was the physical key to the entire offshore portfolio. The deed to the house came with full, unmitigated legal rights to several massive trust accounts, all legally linked through a brilliant shell company Grandma had set up in her early 60s. And the sole, uncontested beneficiary of every single asset was me. Not my mother. Not Julian. Not Penelope. Just me. There were detailed instructions, complex alphanumeric passcodes, a safety deposit box number at a high-end downtown bank, and a small brass key securely taped under the thick back cover of the notebook. I sat back in the floral chair and let out a laugh. It was soft and completely disbelieving. I did not laugh because I found the situation funny. I laughed because it all finally made perfect, terrifying sense. The sheer desperation in Brenda's voice, the exact timing of the 107 phone calls, the aggressive porch visit, Julian's desperate threats of a lawsuit. They absolutely did not want this suburban house. They wanted the millions of dollars systematically tied to it, and they were furious that the family scapegoat was standing in their way. Later that week, I put on my best tailored suit, the one I usually reserved for pitching corporate cybersecurity contracts, and took a trip downtown to the prestigious bank listed in the black notebook. The architecture was imposing, all marble floors and vaulted ceilings. I walked up to the private wealth management desk and requested access to the vault. The manager, a sharply dressed, authoritative woman named Clara, carefully verified my identification, cross-referencing my driver's license with the legal estate documents I provided. "Right this way, Mr. Harrison," Clara said with a respectful nod, her heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. She led me deep into the secured vault, an environment built to protect the secrets of the ultra-wealthy. The safety deposit box was real. Clara unlocked her side. I inserted the brass key from the notebook into my side, and the heavy metal drawer slid open. Inside, I found stacks of original legal documents, embossed stock certificates, an encrypted thumb drive containing digital wallet access, and a thick, sealed envelope with my name written on it. I waited until I got back to the quiet safety of the house to open the envelope. I sat at the kitchen table, took a deep breath, and broke the wax seal. "My dear boy," the letter began, "I do not know where life took you after that terrible day, But if you are reading this, I trust you found your way to a good life. I always knew you would survive them. I saw exactly how they treated you, and it broke my heart into 1,000 pieces every single day. But I also knew that someday, they would need you infinitely more than you needed them. I built this financial empire for you because I believed in you when absolutely no one else did. Do what you want with it. Build something incredible, start fresh, or just breathe without them pulling at you. You have earned your peace. And remember, Harrison, silence is not a weakness. Sometimes silence is the deadliest strategy. Love always, Grandma. I cried. For the first time in 15 incredibly hard years, I put my head down on the wooden kitchen table and I really, truly cried. My shoulders shook with the force of a decade and a half of repressed grief. I cried not just for the lost years, but for the simple, quiet truth that someone in my bloodline had actually seen me. Someone had loved me without conditions, without demands, and had trusted me enough to leave an entire empire in my hands. The very next morning, I contacted Mr. Harrington, the estate lawyer, and scheduled an emergency meeting. I did not want to sell the house. I did not want to cash out the stocks. I wanted to transfer everything carefully, smartly, and ruthlessly into a brand new, ironclad trust. I instructed Mr. Harrington to establish the trust under a completely different corporate name, utilizing proxy directors so the assets could never be directly traced back to me by anyone in my family unless I explicitly wanted them to know. I spent 4 hours in his sleek downtown office, drinking terrible coffee and signing my name on dozens of legal documents. I set up aggressive legal protections, ensuring they could not touch a single cent of the inheritance without going through a labyrinth of corporate litigation. I made myself a ghost in the financial machine. Once the legal fortress was fully operational, I pulled out my burner phone. It was finally time to set the trap. I drafted a short, ambiguous text message and sent it to Brenda, Julian, and Penelope simultaneously. Come to the house tomorrow at noon. We need to finalize the estate agreement. I hit send, placed the phone on the counter, and prepared for war. It was a perfectly clear Saturday afternoon when they showed up. I watched them arrive through the living room window, standing out of sight behind the sheer curtains. They pulled up in the exact same lineup as before. Julian parked his shiny black Porsche on the street, stepping out with the swagger of a man who firmly believed he had just won a grueling marathon. Brenda and Richard followed in their SUV, and Penelope arrived last in a luxury crossover vehicle, her designer sunglasses pushed up into her meticulously styled hair. They walked up the driveway looking visibly tired but incredibly smug. I could see the rehearsed, fake apologies waiting right at the back of their throats. They fully believed my text message meant I had finally broken under the immense pressure. They thought I was going to hand over the keys, sign the quitclaim deed, and disappear back into the shadows where they felt I rightfully belonged. They thought the natural order of our toxic family dynamic was being restored. This time I did not leave the screen door locked. I opened the front door wide, stepped back, and wordlessly motioned for them to come inside. They stepped into Grandma's house like they absolutely owned the place. They looked around with greedy, assessing eyes, mentally calculating the square footage and the potential market value of the hardwood floors and vintage fixtures. I did not offer them anything to drink. I did not ask how they had been. I simply walked into the kitchen and sat down at the head of the heavy oak dining table. I placed Grandma's black notebook directly in front of me, resting my hands flat on the polished wood. I let the silence stretch out, thick and uncomfortable, forcing them to take their seats around me. Brenda was the first to break the tension. She cleared her throat, offering me a weak, deeply manufactured smile that did not reach her eyes. We are so glad you finally called us, Harrison. It has been a lot losing her. We have been thinking a lot about everything that has happened between us over the years, and we just want to move forward as a family. I nodded slowly, my expression completely unreadable. It has been a lot. Julian leaned forward aggressively, folding his hands on the table. He immediately dropped the sentimental act. So, let us get down to business. We heard some things from the probate court about the trust and the house. We figured you finally realized you are in way over your head. We brought a preliminary contract. We can come to a fair financial agreement right here, right now, and avoid a messy public lawsuit. Penelope, always the desperate opportunist, quickly jumped into the conversation. You have always been the smart one, Harry. No one is saying you do not deserve a little something for your trouble. But it was Grandma's money. She loved all of us equally. She would absolutely not want to see her grandchildren divided over money. We can give you a 20% cut of the house sale. You can use it to pay off your debts or maybe put it toward a decent salary if your little computer business is failing. Think of my kids, Harry. We need to secure their college fund. I looked at Penelope, then at Julian, and finally at my mother. My heart rate was perfectly steady. The power dynamic in the room had shifted, and they were completely oblivious to it. She did not leave anything to you? I said softly, the words dropping like heavy stones into a quiet pond. Brenda flinched violently, her polite mask slipping entirely. She made a terrible mistake. She was sick, Harrison. Her mind was going. The lawyer took advantage of her. I shook my head, tapping my index finger against the black notebook. No, she was sharper than all of you combined. She made a deliberate, calculated choice. Julian's tone turned incredibly hard, his superiority complex flaring up instantly. You think you are better than us now? You think because your name is on a piece of paper you suddenly have the upper hand? I make more in a month than you probably make in a year. You are nothing. You are a glorified IT guy holding our inheritance hostage. I do not think I am better than you, I replied evenly, locking eyes with him. I just know I have always been better than how you treated me. Penelope rolled her eyes dramatically, letting out a sharp, exasperated sigh. Oh my God, here we go. So what? You are just going to cut your own flesh and blood off over something stupid that happened 15 years ago? Get over yourself. I was 18 years old, I replied, my voice slicing through the room like a razor blade. You intentionally left me at a gas station in the middle of nowhere and drove away laughing. I slept in a complete stranger's truck that night. I ate stale crackers for dinner. I could have been killed. I could have vanished without a trace, and absolutely none of you would have known or cared for weeks. You abandoned me. That is not a prank. That is not a phase. That is the exact line you drew in the sand. I just finally decided to honor your boundaries. Brenda's lower lip trembled, and she reached across the table, trying to grab my hand to deploy her ultimate weapon of maternal guilt. Harrison, please. Before she could finish her sentence, my phone rang. It was not my burner phone. It was my primary business cell. I looked at the caller ID and smiled. The timing was absolutely perfect. Excuse me, I said casually, standing up slightly. I need to take this. I swiped to answer and put the phone directly on speaker mode, placing it right in the center of the kitchen table for everyone to hear. Harrison, it is Silas. A gruff, exhausted voice echoed loudly through the quiet kitchen. Julian's face instantly lost all its color. He froze completely, his eyes locked onto the glowing phone screen as if it were a venomous snake. Silas was the highly expensive private investigator Julian had quietly hired to dig up dirt on me. Julian thought he was being clever, but Silas was a mercenary. When Silas started digging and discovered the massive corporate cybersecurity firm I owned, and the newly established multi-million-dollar trust fund attached to my name, he realized Julian could never afford to pay his final invoice. So Silas called me 2 days ago, and I offered to pay him triple his rate to hand over every single piece of dirt he had collected on my golden child brother. Go ahead, Silas. You are on speaker, I said smoothly, leaning back in my chair. Yeah, so, I am looking at the financial reports you requested on Julian, Silas said, completely unaware of the horrified audience in the room. The guy is drowning, Harrison. He is completely leveraged. The promotion he bragged about on LinkedIn never happened. He is facing a massive divorce settlement because his wife caught him cheating with his assistant, and he is actively dodging calls from 3 different collection agencies. Julian shot up from his chair scraping violently against the floorboards. Shut up. Shut the phone off. I held my hand up, signaling Silas to continue over the yelling. What about the car, Silas? Oh, the Porsche? Silas laughed a rough, smoking cough of a laugh. It is a long-term commercial rental. He missed the last 4 payments. In fact, my buddy at the repo agency just texted me. The tow truck just hooked it up outside your location about 2 minutes ago. Julian let out a strangled sound of pure panic. He sprinted out of the kitchen, threw open the front door, and ran out onto the front lawn. We could all hear him screaming frantically at the tow truck driver. I calmly ended the call with Silas and looked back across the table. Penelope was sitting with her mouth hanging wide open in pure shock. Brenda looked like she was going to be physically sick. Richard was staring at his hands, entirely defeated by the reality of his favorite son. I reached into my leather briefcase resting on the floor and pulled out a thick manila folder. It contained the financial dossier Silas had compiled, complete with credit reports and legal summons. I tossed it carelessly onto the center of the kitchen table. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. Julian is completely broke, I explained quietly, watching the devastating reality wash over my parents' faces. He is drowning in debt, his marriage is over, and he desperately needed Grandma's estate to save him from bankruptcy. He wanted to force me to sign the house away so he could steal my inheritance to cover his massive failures. And you, Brenda, you were going to let him do it, because he is the golden child. Harrison, we did not know, Brenda whispered, tears finally spilling over her heavily powdered cheeks. But they were not tears of regret for abandoning me. They were tears of pure humiliation because their perfect family image was shattered. You never know anything unless it serves you, I replied coldly. You always backed the wrong horse. You threw away the son who would have actually taken care of you, all to protect the son who is currently screaming at a repo man on the street. The front door slammed open with terrifying force, and Julian stormed back into the house. His perfectly styled hair was a complete mess. His face was violently red with rage, and his expensive suit jacket was wrinkled and stained with sweat. He looked absolutely unhinged. The tow truck had successfully driven off with his fake symbol of wealth, leaving him stranded in the suburbs. He marched straight into the kitchen and pointed a shaking finger directly at my face. You set me up. You planned this from the very beginning. Julian screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. Spittle flew from his lips. You paid that private investigator to ruin me. I did not put you in debt, Julian, I stated calmly, remaining perfectly seated at the head of the table. I did not force you to rent a luxury car you could not afford. I did not force you to lie about your career, and I certainly did not force you to cheat on your wife and trigger a divorce. I just stopped letting you hide your massive mess behind my silence. You did this to yourself. I am going to destroy you in court, Julian roared, slamming his fists onto the kitchen table so hard the coffee mugs rattled. I will hire the best legal team in the state. I will tie this estate up in litigation for the next 10 years. I will prove you manipulated a sick old woman. You will never see a dime of that inheritance. I slowly stood up from the table. I picked up Grandma's black notebook and the sealed envelope, holding them securely against my chest. I looked directly into Julian's bloodshot, manic eyes, and I did not feel an ounce of fear. I felt nothing but profound pity. You do not have the money to hire a lawyer for a parking ticket, let alone a decade-long probate battle, I said softly, delivering the final, fatal blow with surgical precision. And even if you could somehow find a lawyer willing to take your doomed case on contingency, it would not matter. The assets are already gone. Brenda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Julian froze. What do you mean they are gone? He demanded, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. I mean I met with Mr. Harrington 3 days ago, I explained, relishing the look of absolute despair creeping into their features. Every single asset, the stocks, the commercial real estate, the bank accounts, and the deed to this house, have been legally transferred into an irrevocable blind trust. I stepped down as the direct owner. You cannot sue me for assets I technically do not own anymore. The money is legally untouchable, shielded by layers of corporate entities. You lose, Julian. You absolutely, unequivocally lose. The silence that followed was suffocating. The reality of the situation finally crushed the last remaining ounces of arrogance out of him. He stumbled backward, hitting the kitchen counter, gasping for air as if the room had suddenly lost all its oxygen. His fake empire had collapsed, and I was the one holding the sledgehammer. I looked at the four of them standing in my grandmother's kitchen. They looked incredibly small. They looked pathetic. They were no longer the terrifying monsters from my childhood nightmares. They were just sad, broken, deeply flawed people living entirely in a delusion of their own making. "This is how it ends," I declared firmly, pointing my arm toward the front hallway. "Whatever you thought you were going to extract from this house, let it go. It is done. Get out of my house. And if any of you ever attempt to contact me again, if you show up at my property, or if you try to drag my name through the mud, I will have my corporate lawyers file a harassment and defamation lawsuit so fast it will bankrupt whatever miserable funds the rest of you have left." They did not fight back. There was absolutely no fight left in them. Brenda sobbed quietly into her hands as Richard, looking 20 years older than he had when he walked in, gently guided her by the elbow toward the front door. Penelope practically ran out of the house, desperate to distance herself from Julian's sinking ship before his financial ruin somehow infected her. Julian was the last to leave. He dragged his feet across the floorboards, his shoulders slumped, completely and utterly shattered. I followed them out onto the porch. I watched them climb into Richard's SUV, cramming together in the back seat since Julian no longer had a vehicle. I waited until the car reversed down the driveway and disappeared around the corner of the suburban street. Then, I went back inside, closed the heavy wooden door, and locked the deadbolt. And this time, absolutely no one ever knocked on it again. 6 months passed. A quiet, remarkably peaceful 6 months. I decided to stay in the house permanently. I hired a local contractor and spent the spring fully renovating it, updating the kitchen with modern appliances, and building a massive home office in what used to be Grandma's old sewing room. I started dating again, meeting people who had no idea about my chaotic past. I found genuine peace in the small, mundane things, watering the overgrown rose bushes in the front yard every morning, playing old jazz records on her vintage stereo system, and reading through her meticulously organized cookbooks. Then, one Tuesday afternoon in early autumn, my phone buzzed. It was a long text message from an unknown number, but the frantic, desperate tone was entirely unmistakable. It was Penelope. "Harry, please. It is Penelope. Do not block me. I am desperate. Julian is living in Mom and Dad's basement. They took out a second mortgage on their house to pay for his divorce lawyer and clear his debts. It is an absolute nightmare here. Mom cries all day. Please, I need money for custody legal fees. My husband left me. My kids need their college funds secured. I know you have the inheritance hidden away. If you just give me 10%, I swear I will never bother you again. I will even give you all the text messages proving Julian planned to forge your signature on the house deed. Please, Harry, just help me." I sat in my new office, reading the massive block of text. It was the ultimate, predictable betrayal. Penelope was completely willing to sell out our parents and our brother for a quick payout. She had no loyalty to anyone but herself. I did not reply to her. Instead, I took a screenshot of her entire treacherous message. I opened the blocked contacts list on my phone, temporarily unblocked my mother, my father, and Julian, and I created a brand new group chat. I attached the screenshot of Penelope's desperate, traitorous message for all of them to read. I typed one single sentence, "Enjoy your family." I hit send. Then, I permanently deleted the group chat, contacted my service provider to change my phone number entirely, and threw the old SIM card into the garbage disposal. I let them implode. I let them tear each other apart in that toxic, heavily mortgaged house. It was no longer my circus, and they were no longer my monkeys. The evening after I sent that final, destructive message to my biological family, the sky over the suburbs turned a brilliant, bruised shade of purple and gold. I walked out onto the back porch, carrying a steaming mug of peppermint hot cocoa made exactly the way Grandma used to make it, from scratch with heavy cream and roughly shaved dark chocolate. I sat down on the wooden steps, breathing in the crisp, cool evening air. The wind chimes clinked softly overhead, a gentle metallic melody that felt like a blessing. For the first time in my entire life, I felt completely, undeniably free. The heavy, invisible chain that had dragged behind me since that terrible day at the dusty gas station in Nebraska was finally broken. I was no longer running from my past. I had confronted it, dismantled it, and buried it. Healing is not a linear process. It does not happen overnight just because you win a dramatic confrontation or inherit a massive bank account. The trauma of being the invisible child, the scapegoat who was forced to shrink himself to make room for others' egos, leaves deep psychological scars that require daily, intentional work to overcome. But what the inheritance gave me was not just financial security. It gave me the ultimate, impenetrable shield. It gave me the absolute power to permanently enforce my boundaries without any fear of retaliation or manipulation. Over the past 15 years, and especially over the last 6 months, I learned a fundamental truth about human connection. I learned that family is absolutely not determined by blood. Blood just makes you biologically related. Loyalty, respect, mutual support, and unconditional love are what actually make you family. I chose my family. I chose Marcus, the friend who let me sleep on his lumpy couch when I had absolutely nothing to my name. I chose my professional mentors and my colleagues, the people who celebrated my corporate promotions and stood by me through the grueling years of building my life from the ground up. I chose to surround myself strictly with people who did not view my existence as a burden or an opportunity for financial exploitation. My life now is quiet, but it is rich in the ways that actually matter. I run my cybersecurity firm from the comfort of Grandma's old sewing room. I use a portion of the trust fund to quietly sponsor college scholarships for kids aging out of the foster care system. Kids who know exactly what it feels like to be abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect them. I built a life that Margaret would be incredibly proud of. Later that night, I was putting away a stack of Grandma's old cookbooks in the newly renovated kitchen pantry. As I slid the final, heavy hardcover book onto the wooden shelf, a small, faded yellow sticky note fluttered out from between the worn pages and landed gently on the tile floor. I bent down and picked it up. It was written in Grandma's shaky but elegant handwriting. It was not a recipe. It was not a hidden financial passcode or a clue to another bank vault. It was just 5 simple words, written in blue ink. I am proud of you. I held the small piece of paper against my chest, closing my eyes tightly as a fresh wave of emotion washed over me. I did not need the millions of dollars in the offshore trust. I did not need the sprawling suburban house or the commercial real estate portfolio. Those 5 words were the true inheritance. They were the validation I had desperately craved my entire childhood, finally delivered when I needed it most. She saw the man I was going to become, long before I even knew how to survive on my own. I was no longer the forgotten one. I was the one who survived. I was the one who broke the cycle. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far. You're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to protect you just to save yourself? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. Remember, setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. Stay strong, protect your peace at all costs, and I will see you in the next video.